Well, we're going to move from a beautiful garden to talking about how to create beautiful gardens in your spaces, even if you find them uninspired currently. I'm joined by landscape architect Robert Leeper. And Robert, it's a real pleasure to have you on the show.
Thank you very much.
I've seen a lot of your work, at least in images, and I really admire the aesthetic you have. And I think it's going to be exciting for our viewers. And what we're going to be talking about here really is how to take a landscape that might be kind of uninspired and create something that's very new. And your aesthetic, I think, is very cool because it's bold, it's clean, very modern, but at the same time it's also restful and feels garden-like.
Well, thank you. That's a compliment.
And to me, that's a really great thing, because so many people are looking for ways to simplify their lives,
yes.
and this is one way to do it. Now, I know that a lot of your clients come to you with what probably are fairly generic landscapes. How do you begin the assessment of a transformation?
Generally, they call me because, you know, it's a wreck, or it hasn't quite worked out, or there's nothing, you know, and they call and they want to know what I think. They've seen images on my website, or they've been on a tour and seen the garden, or driven past one. And it's a real, you know, when I first walk up, it's a very intuitive experience for me. I almost immediately know what I would want to do, how I would want to change it. And I guess that just comes from years of practice. I think in thinking about how I do design and how I arrived at this aesthetic, it really comes from growing up in Louisiana with a house full of a bunch of kids, and you know, kind of a wild, chaotic mess. You know, it's like cleaning up
like a lot of gardens I've seen.
7 kids is a lot of work, and it can, you know, that has always been, you know, something in my life, is that that attempt on my part to create a sense of order and cleanliness and sort of a peaceful experience. And so when something
that a lot of people are pining for.
Yeah, and it's become very, very popular in the last 10 years or so, sort of the modernism and the simplicity idea. And so that was sort of a natural thing for me to fall into, because that's what I've been doing my whole life, is trying to create something of beauty that had a certain simplicity. And it's very hard to restrain yourself when you have so many favorite plants and you want to do so many things. But it's that paring down of, you know, to get it to just the right level. And oftentimes I will work on a project and reducing it, or just gently adding on to it until somehow it reaches that perfectly balanced point where I say stop, you know, because it pleases my eye and it pleases the client's eye, and even the workers will tell me, this is it, stop right there.
That's good when they're giving you that kind of feedback. Now, I know that a really important starting place for a lot of architects is the home itself.
Very important.
Let's talk about that so that people can understand the concept of how do you connect what you're going to do in the garden to the house.
Well, when I went to school at LSU, when we were learning design, we learned the design comes from 3 places. It comes from the house itself, from the land and what it can really sustain and what it can really do in the environment. And the last thing is me and the homeowner's ideas about stylistically what we want to accomplish. You have to sort of start off with the house and the style of the house. There's no sense. What I'm doing is creating outdoor rooms. I'm expanding the square footage of the house. So to work against the style of the house doesn't make any sense. And many times you'll see a house of a certain style or with certain lines, and then new lines or new styles are introduced. And it can, eclectic can be, you know, a troublesome thing. You know, either you can mix a few things and get it right, or you can mix a few things and it cannot go so right. So what I'm trying to do first is, and that's how when I walk up or drive up and I see the house, immediately my mind starts going, what's complementary to this architecture? How can I bring the style of the home all the way up to the street so that it's one unified piece? And that's what makes, I think, people respond to my landscapes, is they get it. They see it's not just a landscape thrown onto a house, it's a house that expands outward and creates these spaces and these rooms. Even the sidewalk walking up is a room in a sense. It's sort of a foyer or an entry to the house.
There's your gardens have this very planar quality to them. There's this sense of, and I think this is where the serenity comes in. You use these kind of platforms of space and a lot of enclosure as well to create a sense of intimacy.
Yeah.
A lot of times just the flat open spaces can feel exposed, but a little bit of enclosure is a wonderful thing and really gives a sense of being in a room,
right,
which I know is very important. We've talked about it all the time when we talk about landscape design, but it can't be repeated enough, I think, when we're talking to people. It's like, think of us creating a series of outdoor rooms.
That's right.
Yeah.
And that's what I want my clients and their friends to get out into the landscape. The majority of our experience with the landscape is either driving by or driving up to it or looking out the window. Part of my real goal in landscaping is I want to connect people to nature. And that may seem kind of odd given that a lot of my work is really modern and contemporary in style, but the reality is if I can bring them into the outdoors and then connect them to the plants, even if there are just a few of them there, then that's the job I want to do. I also am it's really important for me to create a space that's, you know, where people can go and enjoy being in the sun or listening to the birds. Those are really primitive human experience things, and that's a big part of landscaping, is making that connection for my clients, for all people.
Right. You know, and I think people have misimagined what a garden's about. They imagine it's all about wildscape. But really, to me, and I think that Americans like to think they're very informal, that they're naturalistic, but if you give people the option of going into a cluttered kind of wildscape or a clearly defined landscape, I would say that probably 95% of people would go into the clearly defined, where's my entry point? Where can I be in this place?
A lot of visual clues that a garden designer, just by the way you orient your pathway, and you know, that's the old Japanese garden design of, you know, you have the pathway go this way for this focal point and then it turns and then there's another focal point. There's a lot of manipulation, if you will, of the experience. As a designer, you want people to see certain things and you want them to experience certain things.
Right. Another thing I really love about your work is, and I think this is another thing that people need to bear in mind, and I often say this to folks, is that repetition of forms and use of geometry is really important. And there's one particular landscape we have some images of that's looks like a kitchen garden with little squares that I think is just super. I mean, really terrific.
Well, I think by using a lot of geometry and good lines, that actually creates sort of a calm feeling, you know, because it is ordered. And then the plants can sort of do their thing and grow out, and you really can see when you're looking at that composition, the juxtaposition between the order of the stonework and then perhaps the wildness of the plant. It really shows off well. It really shows that plant well.
Right. And you know, all this to me makes so much sense for the way that we live our lives today. And this comes back around to what I said at the beginning, that people are hungry for a less cluttered life, I think.
Yeah.
And our lives are hectic, and these kinds of spaces evoke within you, I think, a sense of order and peace and calm. But also there's the maintenance side of it as well.
Well, it's very easy, you know, if I use a lot of gravel on the ground surface to rake it up or blow the leaves and keep it clean. It's not as high of maintenance as a traditional garden. And one of the things, too, that I try to do with the hardscapes is create a space, a bench or something, where people can go and sit and be in the space. That's a big part of it. I want people to be out in there.
You know, and the hardscape part of it invites people easily into the outdoors. Now, how can people be in touch with you?
They can go to my website. That's the ideal, easiest way, because then they can contact me through there by email or call me on the phone. But the website gives them a lot of not just visual information from photographs of different gardens, where they can see, and there's a variety. It's not just contemporary modern stuff. There's a lot of different styles going on there. But that's probably the best way, the website.
Well, and I know your work has been on tour and that people have experienced
Yeah.
it that way. We really appreciate you making time to be with us
I'm
today, and
thrilled to be
congratulations
here.
on great resume. It looks like a great portfolio of work.
Thank you very much. Really happy to be here.
Coming up next, it's Skip Richter.